Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick. Thanks so much for being here. We took a 2-week break. Things got a little busy around here. As I'm sure in your household you can relate, kids just make things, kids' activities make the week fly by. It's like when they get out of school, you got to rush to get dinner and go to an activity, and that's kind of how our week was. And then on the weekends, my kids were starring in the show 9 to 5 as part of a kids cast for a local high school. It was a great experience for them. They had a lot of fun, but it kind of sucked the wind out of my sails in getting a podcast done. But nonetheless, we're back this week, and we are here with a brand new guest, and we're glad that you're here. It does make me wonder sometimes, though. I think of podcasts that do release every single week without missing an episode. One of those is my friend Carl at Who Are These Podcasts. He never misses a week. It's amazing. And sometimes he does have a couple people fill in for him. I don't have that luxury, but he does it almost every single Saturday. And I'm thinking, how does this guy have the time to do that? And then I'm like, oh yeah, he doesn't have kids. And that sucks up a ton of time. We are on social media. We have a big Facebook group called Fancounters. You can search for that. Or if you want this smaller group, the more intimate size group, you can look for Sharpie Nation on Facebook. It's a private group. Just ask to join and I'll let you in. And finally, if you're listening to us on a podcasting app, please subscribe to the show, whether you found us because of who we're interviewing today or you've been just randomly listening. Hit the subscribe button so you'll know all of our future guests coming up. In fact, if you're here for Kipp Marcus, you might want to join us again because we are trying to track down John Snee for an interview. And we've talked with Kalina Kiff about her coming on the show. We hope to have both of them on in the near future. Now let's get on to today's show. Kipp Marcus is joining me. He played the oldest of the Cleaver kids on the new Leave It to Beaver, Kip Cleaver, and he has got the same first name. Kip is going to be joining us from New York City tonight. He is from Luxembourg, but they have come to the United States for a vacation for their child's birthday. They went to the musical Frozen tonight on Broadway, went out to dinner. Now Kip's back at his hotel room, and I'm going to connect him to the show in just a minute. Also joining me is Bryon Nelson Jr. from the new Leave It to Beaver Facebook group. He's in Florida, so we're going to have a 3-way call. I'm going to set it all up, and we're going to get started right after this opening.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fan Counters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Kipp Marcus, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's great.
No problem. Now, we've got Bryon Nelson Jr. with us, and he wrote some great questions about the new Leave It to Beaver, and we are going to go into those first before we get into some more general career questions and whatnot. So, Bryon, why don't you lead us off?
All right. My first question is this, and like I said, I'm Bryon Nelson. I run the new Leave It to Beaver fan club fan page.
Yeah.
And I also run the original show page on Facebook as well. The one thing is you replaced Corey Feldman, in the show later on, after it went from the movie to the TV show. So how did that go? Were you approached for the role, or did you have an agent, or did you audition? How exactly did that go?
Corey did the TV movie, Still the Beaver, back, I think, in 1983. They probably shot it in late 82, early 83. I didn't really know anything about that show or that film. And I was doing Oliver, the musical on Broadway with Ron Moody, who, was up for the Oscar, playing Fagin in the film version of Oliver that won Best Picture, and Patti LuPone, who was very famous for having played Evita, originating that role and winning, I think, the Tony Award. And so I was doing that in New York, and I was a bit of a geek for Leave It to Beaver. It was playing a lot kind of in reruns, and I saw on Entertainment Tonight one night that they were doing this nationwide search for the role. I think at the time, I forget whether it was called Corey at the time or what, but they were looking for the boy who would ultimately be the new Wally. And I had just gotten a manager. I got Oliver in a very similar way. I got on a train from Connecticut to New York, went to an open call. There were hundreds and hundreds of kids, auditioned and ended up on Entertainment Tonight, like the night I auditioned, and like all of a sudden, within like a week, I got cast in this musical, and the same sort of thing happened to me with Leave It to Beaver. What happened was I called my manager, who was this very funny kind of Joe Pesci New York manager, and I got on the phone with him. His name was Vince, and I said, I want you to get me in for this Wally role in this show called Still the Beaver. And he was like, Kip, what are you doing? You can't. This isn't your type of show. It's not your type of thing. I mean, you're from New York, And he went into this whole thing, and I was like, yeah, no, exactly. So I said. No, I think I can do this, and I really, I think it's a really interesting thing that they're rebooting it and they got the original cast, etc. And anyway, I got an audition, and the funny thing about the audition is that I was living in Connecticut. They Universal and Disney was, or pretty much at this point, I think it was just Universal, was coming to New York to do a full day at a hotel of interviews. And so they were just interviewing boys like the entire day. And I went early in the day, I think, for a pre-read with I'm sort of blanking a little on the casting director's name. But be that as it may, did the reading, went well, and they said, hey, can you come back, in 3 hours and read for the producers? And of course, I was like, yeah, of course. But you have to understand, I didn't go in with my parents. I wasn't like a stage kid with like parents who were like busting me around auditions. Right. And so basically, I lost track of time. I was 14.
Oh, no.
It was the middle of summer. And I really can't remember. I probably went to like an arcade, and I started playing video games, whatever, and realized I lost track of time and ran back to this hotel to do the reading, and got to the hotel at 5:10, and the day was supposed to end at 5:00. And when I say that, literally the camcorders, all the paper, all the scripts, everything had been packed up, and Ned Null and I think it was Nick Abdo were leaving.
Oh no!
And I ran in, and they turned around and they just kind of laughed, and they said, "Okay, let's see you." So they reset everything up. And I did this scene. I think it was like the Thanksgiving script, but I don't recall. And I read it through with them, and it seemed to go well. I went home, went back to the country, and I got a phone call on the weekend that Disney wanted me to fly to California and have a screen test. And I remember at the time it was a really surreal sort of moment. Just this whole idea. I hadn't been to California before. It was a whim again, kind of like Oliver. Just kind of like I had a hunch, and here I am, and they want me to go out there and be screen tested. I think they had said something like there's going to be one other kid who's going to screen test at this point, and there were a couple funny things that I remember about it. So the first thing is that they told my manager that I should try and like scrub the New York out of myself before the meeting with Disney. And you know, I just remember I put like lemon juice in my hair on the weekend. I had pretty black hair, and it generally was quite wavy, bit curly, and so like I kind of like put all this juice in my hair, sat out in the sun. I was a pretty pale guy, you know, like got some sun, and then I hopped on a plane. You know, it was the law that you had to fly first class, so like literally it flew me out, and I went into the studio. I remember seeing, I think I saw Johnny there with his mom, and but we were reading separately, I believe, and we read through the stuff, and then we went to this. I mean, it was pretty intense. I mean, I went to this room. There were like 20 executives. I mean, it was really intense.
Wow.
You were reading against John.
John Sneed?
I wasn't reading. John Sneed was going in for Ollie, and I think I remember seeing him that day. And then we read it through. They asked me some questions, then maybe gave me some adjustments. We read it through again, and then they told us to hang out. You know, and then I think there was kind of like a bit of a knockdown round, and then they asked me to come back in the afternoon and do it again. And so I went back in the afternoon, and I read everything through again. And then Charlie Engle, who was the president of Universal at the time, asked for me to come to his office, like at 5 o'clock. And I went to his office, and I remember he took me out to he had this sort of model of the back lot of Universal that was like in his office. And he showed me it. It was really cool. And he sat down at his desk. And I remember thinking at the time, like, man, if I'm not getting it, this really sucks.
Yeah.
Because at this point he's like showing me just like the whole magic, you know. And at some point in the conversation, he just said, "Welcome to the Universal family."
Wow.
Nice.
And I almost fell over my chair, and I remember two things about it. First thing is I went to the pool, you know, and again, being an East Coast kid, you know, this whole sort of palm tree, like, you know, out by the pool. I mean, none of this stuff was real to me. And right. I remember laying in the pool, you know, looking up at the sky. It was a perfect blue, sunny August day. And just saying to myself, I can't believe this. I'm not going back to Connecticut. I am going to start working on this show. It just was surreal. And it was also surreal because I was starting high school. And so, you know, the whole thing is, you know, I mean, just imagine that for a moment. You know, if you can just put yourself in that situation, your family's in Connecticut, you're in Los Angeles, and you're basically being told, you know, you're moving to LA, and you're going to start filming this show, and your freshman year is going to be on still the Beaver at the time. It was really quite something. And, you know, and then it was just sort of a mad scramble to figure out the logistics, because my family, you know, while supporting it, nobody was moving. So it was the type of thing where, you know, half of it was just figuring out who the heck is going to live with me. And that was its own story, and I went through many chapters of that story because pretty much every grandparent got a tour of duty with me, and at some point I'll tell you a very funny story about going to Bryon Levant's. Before I lived with him, you know, my Grammy had come out to stay with me for 4 months of the shoot, and so we were staying in like Oakwood Apartments, which were these, you know, executive sort of suites in Burbank. And you know, you get these like 2-bedroom sort of condos, whatever. And that, by the way, that was after my first time I was in, I was staying for the first season. I was living with my manager's assistant who was like a 25-year-old woman who had just moved to Los Angeles.
Oh my gosh.
And I was sleeping on her couch. So that was like my first run of being in LA and working on a film set. And talk about like not just a culture shock, but just sort of like a life shock. The demands of being on a set every day without like serious parental supervision is intense. And so the second time I had my Grammy come with me, and so you spoke to Bryon. So Bryon's a pretty funny guy, and Bryon was the executive producer of the show, and really created the Still to Beaver concept and Newly to Beaver spinoff of it, and he loved the show and he loved everything about it, and it was a legend and so we got invited to a pool party at his house for one of his kids' birthdays, and he lived up in Coldwater Canyon at the time, and my Grammy and I went up to his house, and the party was it was like this really fun kids party and balloon animals and just food and pool and everything. Mm-hmm. And at some point my Grammy came up to me and she was frantic and she said, "Kippy, we have to leave right away." And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, I can't tell you. It's too embarrassing." I said, "Just tell me what happened." And she said, Your producer, he saw me naked." And I said, "What?" And she said, "It's too embarrassing to explain." Now you have to understand, I was 14.
Right. You didn't want to see. You don't want to picture that.
What is this, American Pie? Like I had no clue what was going on.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Grammy, what happened?" She said, "Well, you know how I love to check my weight." So she was obsessed with her weight. She always wanted to weigh herself, and so she was very vain. And so she said, "So your producer Bryon has the most fantastic scale." And at this point, I just said, I really don't like where this is going. I mean, I was like, I just don't want to know, but I want to know. It's like one of those like car wrecks. You see it all happening in slow motion. You just keep staring at it. It's crashing through traffic. And so she says to me, "Well, so I wanted to get my pure weight. So, of course, I took off all my clothes." At this point, it was like white noise, And Bryon walked in on my Grammy. He didn't knock. She was in the bathroom. And he walked in, and she was standing on the scale in his bathroom weighing herself.
This $1 million home didn't have a door lock on the bathroom?
I'm not
Grammy.
kidding. I'm not kidding. Grammy didn't clearly know that there were locks.
Apparently.
And so at this point I was like, okay, you're right. We have to get out of here. So now the funny thing about the whole story is that we were pulling out of the driveway and she said, "Oh, wait a minute. You have to go back in." Because she had this fabulous balloon poodle that the balloon guy who was doing balloon animals had made for her. And you have to know my Grammy. I mean, my Grammy was a very eccentric, very funny lady, amazing woman. And I went back in, tail between my legs, picked up this poodle thing, and jumped in the car. The next day we were at the studio, and I went into the writer's room in the morning, and I'm not kidding. Mike DiGaetano, all these guys were around the writer's desk, and they just they'd all heard the story. And the second they saw me, it was like people were falling on the floor like, "Hey, her Bryon saw your grandma yesterday."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so anyway, great stories, but amazing and really dramatic and at times traumatic because it was such a different world for me, and I had to figure it all out for myself, which was fascinating, but I really wanted to do it. And so that's the thing. Like, there were moments where I was definitely like, okay, I don't know if, without having the family support, et cetera, there with me in California, if this is going to work out. But I found a way. And so by the time I had gone through a couple of grandparents, Bryon one day and his wife, Al, who is this amazing woman, said to me, "You want to live with us?" And I was like, yeah.
Problem solved.
I moved. I'm not kidding. I think I moved into their house like that weekend, and then for the next couple of seasons, I stayed with the Levants, and I remember babysitting their baby. Like I was really good with little kids, and so I had sort of those mid-teen years at the Levant's house.
That's crazy.
And it was terrific for me, and I can remember going to Henry Winkler's, and hanging with his son in their garage playing instruments, and Jed is his son's name, and I remember Henry like teaching me geometry. I mean, like literally, like to have a childhood where these are some of your seminal moments. And every time I would see Henry years later, whether I was on a different film set or he was in New York for some reason, or when I was in Les Miserables, we would see each other. I'd say, you remember you taught me geometry at your kitchen counter? But Henry was that type of guy. And Bryon had these seminal relationships with these legendary, Ron Howard, Henry, these, absolutely legendary people for me, because those shows, like Happy Days was the rerun show when I was a kid. I mean, it was like Friends today, it was the show that ran endlessly. And so I saw every time I was homesick, air quotes, I watched Happy Days, and so, I went to the movies with these guys, I got to to have these incredible just moments as a child. I mean, you saw, the Bryon Wilson episode as an example. Sure, the Beach Boys are, you're gonna sing with the Beach Boys. Yeah, great.
That's how I spent my childhood.
Yeah, we have a statue of Henry Winkler at our lakefront.
In Milwaukee, yeah.
The lakefront of
awesome.
Lake Michigan, yeah, because it was in Milwaukee, and that's the farm.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's out there, and
I really think one of my first crushes as a child was Pinky Tuscadero. I have these moments of memory with that show. The basketball episode with Tom Bosley and Ron, when he blows the game, the Pinky Tuscadero episode, these were just seminal. And then it's incredible that for, close to 5 years, I got to play with, Barbara and Tony and Janice, and Bryon and Ned Null. They were all at my wedding. These were, these were family for me, and they each taught me different things. I was very lucky because I was drawn to the executives at the company, and so people like Ned Null, who became the president of the studio after Charlie, became a dear friend, and he was, I gravitated to all the adults. I didn't really hang out with the kids. And so it was that I wanted to be in the writer's room. I wanted to be with Bryon. I wanted to be with Ned, and understand what they were doing. I remember giving Ned Null a script of a Leave It to Beaver episode that I wrote when I was 15.
Wow.
And he marked it up and, gave me tons of notes, and but I was having this experience, and I wanted to take it, and truth be told, when I was applying to college, And they thought it was crazy, right? So everybody at the studio thought I was going to just continue to work at the to work at the studio, and like people are like, why does he want to go to university? He's doing this thing. He's already doing what he wants to do, etc. And I really wanted to have this other experience and go to NYU and
that's Southern Dominion, huh?
Right, Southern Dominion. Well done. And basically, Ned Null wrote my recommendation letter for Tisch School for the Arts, and in the letter, which he shared with me years later, it said, "We tried to convince Kip to just become a mini mogul and start working at Universal Studios as an executive, but he has this crazy idea that he should go to Tisch. And so I'm recommending him."
Wow.
It's like,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Cool recommendation, like.
I'll say, and a lifelong friend, and years later, if we end up chatting about some of the movies and things that I produced, the studio came to bat and helped me with all sorts of crazy requests because I had these friendships, and they were my family.
You said you gravitated to the adults in the cast. Now, in the Thanksgiving episode, that was centered mainly around you. And that was, you wanted to go to a friend's house, and your dad said, "No, it's really your family you should be with. It's a holiday that you should spend with the family."
Yeah.
But he let you go on your way. But anyways, Hugh Beaumont's sister was in that episode. Now, she wasn't an actress per se, but was she around enough to talk to her, get any information, any members that she shared, or how did that all work?
No, not really. I mean, I think with the kids, she kind of on that front, I think, kept to herself. The thing is, you have to think about like when you're on one of these sets. So you've got you're pretty much locked with a tutor for X hours, right? So 3 hours of your work day, and you're pretty much maxed at 7 or 8, right? And so you're on set, and then you're in with your tutor, and if you're not in with the tutor, you're in with a dialogue coach working on the text, and so unless you had a lot of direct engagement with the actor in the scenes, you would have to go out of your way. Now, truth be told, like Hugh Beaumont, for me, he embodied sort of this extraordinary sort of patient, loving, but serious father figure. And almost like an archetype that, and so I always had this, I think probably a lot of people did who either grew up in reruns or actually grew up watching the show like Bryon did, a sort of this relationship with Hugh. We all, in one way or another, had moments where we were like, wow, if you could have a dad like Hugh. And my dad is a great dad, but my family, we were not the Beaver, we weren't the Cleaver family. My family, they were divorced when I was 5 years old. I went back and forth between New York and Connecticut my entire childhood, and my brother and I were very creative kids who did all sorts of cool entrepreneurial things to kind of both escape and also be grown up super fast. And so Hugh kind of, and that episode was really interesting because that episode kind of, I definitely identify with this idea of sort of wanting to escape my family, and having those experiences where you just want to be with somebody else's family. And the thing that's so painful in that show is, of course, that, you know, he has this whole thing worked out in his head, and how we've all had that moment, which is one of the things that's so brilliant about that show. Everybody has that moment of expectation. No, I'm going, of course, yeah, his parents know, and I'm going to spend the day with them, and it's very painful for the parents, for his parents, to hear that, and then to go over there and realize there's no plan. You're not invited. And you know, we've all had that moment of, like, you know, we talk with our friend and we think it's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. It's devastating. And so, and then he's humiliated. And so Kip goes through this whole episode with this idea in his head, and then he realizes, like, he's locked out. He's locked out of that, and now he feels like he shunned his own family and he can't go home. And then you have Eddie, right? I mean, it's Eddie that kind of does the right thing, sort of. It's kind of amazing, but
kind of off the wall, yeah.
Yeah.
It would happen, yeah.
Yeah. No, he had these moments, and he had them with me. I mean, he did have these. I mean, he has hysterical versions of that moment with me as well, where he would literally. I mean, that episode. I forget the name of it, but the one where the wall is over. That, you know. That
was In the Wings.
Okay, In the Wings, right? So in The Wings, you think he's gonna give me brilliant advice, the whole thing with me and Freddie, and then he's just like, basically, get out of my bar. I'm missing business. He doesn't want to help me at all, you know. Yeah. But that was the gene. You know, the writers on this show. I mean, the things they wrote, the lines they gave those guys, Freddie and Eddie, they were so funny. The dialogue was so crackling. It was so, for the time, outrageous to hear a kid kind of behave that way and talk the way he did, and trick people, and you know, the sort of Machiavellian situation with, and his dad with the beers, and you know, you know, walking through the house in the middle of the afternoon with a cooler in his living room. I mean, yeah. It you know, I mean, think about that. Like, yeah. You know, it was pretty. You know, I mean, of course, you know, there was also Ollie and me, and, you know, the much purer side. But even there, I mean, we grappled with, you know, two-timing, and, you know, I had it all. And you had these episodes like, okay, kid gets mono, he ends up in the hospital. You know, I mean, it was definitely trying to push for the genre some pretty good stuff that teens go through. You know,
yeah, and we were two-timing with the Playboy girl.
Erica Ladiak. Yep, that's true. But I didn't get a chance to really spend time, unfortunately, with you, sister.
Kip, fans want to know a lot about the singing in the series. In fact, there's been a lot of discussion lately in the Facebook group about some of the songs that you did with Freddie, Eric Osmond. So you had a band. So fans want to know, how did the singing come to be? Did they know that you had vocal ability and then they used that in the show? Tell me about how music got started to be put into the show.
Yeah, I mean, it really was one of the very fortunate things, I think, that hit early enough that we were able to record quite a bit. You know, they knew that I had come from a Broadway background, and that I obviously I think in the car with Bryon, you know, on the way to the office, because I would drive in with him quite a lot. You know, we would listen to Howard Jones and you know, tons of other sort of early 80s artists, and so he definitely knew that I sang, and I think pretty early, we did that episode where I sang I Only Have Eyes for You, I think. That was pretty early in the show, and that started a little bit of a thing, and then they did the fantasy episode with the My Girl thing with Freddie. but not singing because Eric didn't really sing, and then but he did play guitar a bit, and then it started to kind of snowball a little, and by the time we had the band, and the probably the funniest lyrics of any television rock song with Fire in the Gym happened.
Yep.
The show had kind of come into this thing of like, okay, there's going to be this band, Kip's going to play synth and sing, and Freddie's going to play guitar, and it was a blast. And I mean, first of all, Fire in the Gym, when I saw the script for that, and I saw the lyrics, oh, baby, can't you see I'm the real fantasy? You were the cutest girl around. Now you're 6 feet underground. I mean, that was so funny. I mean, it really was. It was like, I can't believe these guys are doing this. This is just ridiculous. And then, by the time we did Daydreamin', and, that one, Bryon directed. He won an ACE Award for best show or best episode for a cable show. We got a ton of nominations for other things. It was very inventive, and we were really pushing the envelope at that point. It was fantasy. It was the whole show's a musical. Barbara's going to sing. I mean, everybody's singing. Even people who should never sing were singing. And I remember Tony. I still can remember that moment of him in that trampoline in the middle. In the middle of the street. I mean, he. First of all, a lot of people don't know this, but I mean, Tony was, pre-Olympic, and he was definitely like
very athletic guy.
Yeah. And he could do anything. He was very acrobatic, flips and twists and all sorts of things. And he got on that trampoline, and they just started filming him like for an hour, and he just was doing all this crazy stuff. But it was my favorite time in the show. I felt like we were really trying things and having a lot of fun, and the cast really did have a lot of fun doing those episodes, and they seemed to be some of the more popular ones. I mean, they certainly were the ones that got the most attention and the ones that got the awards. And Bryon had a love of music as well, and he and I would go to concerts together, and it was definitely something. It was always in my blood, and I write a ton. I'm writing a musical right now. It's always been a part of my family, music, and so it was great that the show actually embraced that, and we really went for it.
The cool thing you mentioned the episode, Daydreamin' with you have a crush on this new girl in the school. I got to tell you, she was my favorite female, guest appearance actress. Very attractive young lady.
She and she sang a bit like Olivia Newton-John, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the girl who sang "What's Come Over Me."
Yeah.
She was beautiful, and she was really nice.
What was her name?
It's actually terrible that I'm forgetting her name right now.
Her name, I can't think of her character, but her character's name is Chelsea Morgan.
That's right.
What's funny about that is there's glasses by that name now. I was getting my eyes examined, and I saw Chelsea Morgan glasses. And
okay, that's really funny.
I thought, wow, what are the chances of that?
Yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, we had, we had the guys who, Mel Johnson, I'm just remembering the cast director, but that we had we were blessed with extraordinary guest performances, and guys like Giovanni Ribisi were good friends when all the years he did the show. Of course, Leaf and Summer and Nicole, and it was Robin. I mean, they, one after the other of these guys would come in, and then you'd have people like Ray Walston. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, these are legends. And they just they just swing by like, this person's playing the teacher, and this is pre-IMDb days, but like. You knew these faces. You knew them from Channel 9 movie clubs or Channel 5 reruns or whatever. You knew these guys, and one after the other, and then this new generation that was coming in. You had all of these young actors and actresses. Jack Black. I mean, coming through and doing guest spots. And Amy Dolenz. I remember Amy. I think it was Amy that I sang to.
That's the one where you sang that song to her.
That's right. The Buddy Holly song, I think. But Amy, I mean, I got to stand with her backstage at a Monkees reunion show. I mean, like,
cool.
I went to a party with like Mickey Dolenz. I mean, it's like.
Also, was she his daughter?
Yeah, that's his daughter.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, really cool. So we just had these, we were, and then just the fact that your childhood, you're driving around. I remember when I got old enough to be allowed to drive one of the golf carts around Universal, and so like all the younger kids, Fred, and Eric and Johnny and Kalina, I was like a god because I could take them around. It was like the funniest thing, but we were in a golf cart. I mean, and then when Johnny was finally old enough to drive the thing, it became like hysterical. I think he might have crashed it once, actually. I have to ask him that question. But this was also part of our life. We would drive up to the Norman Bates, motel,
Psycho House, yeah.
Watch, sit behind the Jaws show and watch the shark attack the tour. That was our backyard, and you could go and see these things. I mean, you weren't loud, but we went. It was great.
I was going to say, you mentioned the golf cart, yeah, and I don't know what the age was where you were allowed to drive it, but the rap party during the rolling of the credits. John is giving the audience a tour using one of those golf carts.
Yes. Well,
I don't know if we're supposed to be like that.
Exactly. No, exactly. I mean, and all the guards knew us, and you weren't going to get away with much, but you definitely got away with a lot. But look. The other thing that was just amazing, we were probably the cleanest, most boring group of kids. Like, by comparison to the other kids who were on the lots, this was a group of kids that never fell into drugs, that never got into anything crazy. They kind of did their job. They were goofy and screwed around like the kids, like the actual characters they played. But they never got too deep into anything rough and or scary, and they had. I mean, they weren't normal childhoods, but they were interesting and challenging, and but somewhat safe. I mean, it actually. It's sort of amazing to me when I think back on it, because there were kids all around us who were having problems and real problems, and you'd see this stuff and go like, I must not be invited to the right parties. I don't know what it was, but we kind of dodged those bullets.
Do your kids appreciate how cool your childhood was? Do they understand, all the neat things you got to do?
Well, full disclosure, I have sort of a gang of kids, so I have 5 kids, and between the ages of 4 and 14, and I have 4 boys and a girl, and they're just, well, each in their own way, they're just starting to get more of this stuff around the show, because a lot of this stuff is now available on YouTube, and And so there's they know that I Papa was in Les Miserables, and Papa has made movies, and he did this TV show. So they know that stuff, but I think it's sort of dawning on them more. Your sort of fan group is a great example. It's sort of, there are people who have had a real experience with the show and kind of grew up a bit with it. And so that's profound. And whenever I see letters from grown-ups who are like, that helped me raise me, or, I felt really connected to this or that, you do forget that. I mean, because we all have our complicated lives, and you move on, and and of course my kids all in one way or the other have the bug of entertainment. My son Quinn just starred in a movie with John Cusack and Emile Hirsch that was out in theaters this past year, called Never Grow Old, and is a really extraordinary art house Western, and he has a big role in it, and it was really well reviewed. It's an amazing film. My eldest son has a film review site who's 14 called Sweet and Sour Movies with his younger brother Quinn, and they've reviewed hundreds and hundreds of movies. They wrote the review site because they wanted to review films from a kid's perspective.
Very cool.
And so my middle son Hudson goes to the recording studio with me, and is a brilliant actor, but he's also got a beautiful singing voice, and so he records on some of my stuff. It's a family affair. My wife starred in my movie that was at Sundance, and Let It Snow, is a brilliant Shakespearean actress. So they all have kind of the bug, and in their own ways, but they're all, they're very unique, each one of them, and are expressing it in their own ways. So I hopefully as all the episodes kind of make their way into the world in a digital way, they'll really have an opportunity to see some of the ones that are more seminal. My Hudson just started to see things like clips from Daydream, and then he was like, he was like crazy. He wanted to see the whole thing. I was like, I don't have, at some point they'll post it, whatever. But
it is available now.
Is it really? Oh, great.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
That's great. Yeah, because he's he was like, I want to see it, and I want to see the. It's actually really funny. My ex-girlfriend from high school is in the Garage Band song.
Oh, really?
The girl that it's a great trivia question for you, because the girl that I spin around in the garage and dance with was my girlfriend in high school, and she happened to be on set that week visiting me from Connecticut. And she was just a regular girl. She was a Connecticut Yank, and had just been out there. And so Bryon was like, put your girlfriend in this, and like, so literally, I just spun her around, and she was in the episode. That was that. I mean, we did these things, But yeah, it's also, of course, it's also really freaky when you have 5 kids and you're like, you've seen it, you've either lived certain things, but you've also had a television version of yourself live certain things. It's very funny when you start to parent and you have like all these catchphrases and all these you have your Ollie moments and your Kip Cleaver moments and your Freddie moments and your Freddie friends. It's fascinating to see how it evolves in your own life. Yeah, it's cool.
All right, we're going to cut part 1 right there. We'll be back next Friday with part 2 of our interview with Kipp Marcus, where we're going to find out about that story that Brian Levant told us about a pool table. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have a week to go back and listen to Brian's appearance on Fancounters and hear what we're talking about. So when we ask Kipp about it in part 2, you'll know what Brian said. It's about a pool table. You can't miss it. That's our teaser for next week. Thanks for joining us. You can email us at hello@fancounters.com. In fact, if you have a question that you want to ask John Snee or Kalina Kiff, should they appear on Fan Counters, please send it to hello@fancounters.com, and we will ask them as a part of our interview. All right, next week, more with Kipp Marcus. So be sure to join us and tell a friend. We'll see you next week on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. Welcome to Fancounters. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
Oh my God, you're back.
Yay! I haven't left you all. Really, I haven't.
There was a lot of speculation that you'd never be on the show ever again.
Yeah, I had some emails and some texts that came through going, what the heck? And I'm terribly sorry, guys. It just didn't work out, and it's been a really crazy, crazy winter at my house. My mother was in the hospital from Thanksgiving until Christmas, and then it kind of just went downhill from there. She is fine, but it's really been a long, long winter, and I'm so glad to be back.
I'm glad you're back, too. Now, we talked about the fact that some weeks it's very hard to get guests, and we decided, Elizabeth and I, that we're not going to let Hollywood dictate whether we can have a show or not.
Yeah.
But we can ask Elizabeth to turn off her phone. That would be...
Which it is. So I'm surprised
Well, it's
it
not,
made
'cause
that noise.
It just beeped at me. So we're not going to let any agents or managers dictate whether or not we tape a podcast, whether they put a guest on or not. So we are going to launch into something next week, you and me.
Yes.
Where we're just going to talk about some entertainment highlights that have gone on in the celebrity world. Give our take on it, because, that's what a lot of podcasts are, is just people talking, and they're wildly popular.
I know.
And we've gotten good comments about our banter and just the fact that people like listening to the interaction.
Right.
So we'll go with it.
Okay.
So we'll do that next week. Now, Elizabeth, you weren't here for this interview, but how did you ever watch the new Leave It to Beaver?
I have recollections of watching it, but I don't remember a whole lot about it. I know that I liked Leave It to Beaver, so I feel like I would have watched the new Leave It to Beaver.
Well, we are the one podcast, the only show that's been reuniting the whole entire cast at different times, of course.
Yes.
But over the course of our show. So we've had Tony Dow and Jerry Mathers.
Yep.
We had Janice Kent, who played Tony Dow's wife on the new show. We had Kipp Marcus last week. We're going to finish with him this week. We're working on John Snee and Kalina Kiff, the other two kids on the show. Troy Davidson is in my network, so I'm going to see if I can get him on the show. He played the little brother of Tony Dow's son. Yeah. The little brother Kelly, that's the name I was looking for. But I want you to be here when we get the Osmonds. So when we have Ken Osmond and Eric and Christian, I want you to be here for that.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
So we're going to work on getting those reunions set up and get everybody on the show, and we'll continue to do that as we progress through the year.
Yeah.
All right, so let's finish up this week. We had Kipp Marcus last week. He was in New York visiting, Broadway and stuff for his kid's birthday. And he's from Luxembourg. It was really nice that we didn't have to work around that 7-hour time difference to do an interview.
Yeah.
And let's continue now. Here's part 2 with Kipp Marcus, who played Kip Cleaver on the new Leave It to Beaver.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fan Counters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fan Counters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
And I found it very coincidental that, Corey Feldman and yourself both had your own names as your character names.
Yeah, well, they really like the alliteration. So they like the alliteration of both Corey Cleaver and Kip Cleaver. I think that was one of the things they dug. The sort of the sound of the names sounded good, which probably right. And then they were also thinking of just sort of like, oh, it's really easy and it's easy to remember. And mine, I think both of our names were somewhat unique. I didn't know any kids named Corey at the time, and certainly I never knew a Kip.
You have a tip in a bottle right down the street from my house.
Well, of course, the only Kip that I knew growing up was Tom Hanks in Bosom Buddies, and that was with one P. My name was uniquely spelled with two, but my character was one exactly. Yeah, so and I guess I always think myself. I'm always grateful for the fact that I'm glad I was the Kip, because it was fun getting to do the show for as many years as I was able to, and to kind of really be in the family. That was special, because I think a lot of people, the movie was very well viewed, but it was erased rather quickly when the show happened. You didn't get any questions growing up about Corey. It's kind of interesting. We were able to quickly kind of pivot to our story, which is really the brilliance, I think, of the writing team, and kind of just getting into the real show. The movie was a bit of a downer. I mean, it was kind of depressing, and you're dealing with a lot of heavy stuff. And the show, while it definitely had its little moments like that, it tried to stay on sort of lighter side of childhood, dealing with the anxiety that kids have, which is like, oh no, I just spilled paint, or I'm going to get in trouble. I mean, most of the things are really about that complex, but it's really how kids deal with real situations, which are for them terrifying, and yet for a parent you just kind of chuckle and go like, I can't believe my kid's really freaked out about this. But childhood's hard, right? It's hard, and it's full of anxiety. And so these shows, which there aren't many today, right? I mean, Malcolm in the Middle was obviously a great one at, I think, doing this as well, but there aren't that many shows today that really capture, and the Wonder Years was brilliant at doing it. But if you think of the last 15, 20 years, like my kids, they watch like some of the Amazon shows like Gordimer. They really like that. But there's not a lot. There's not a lot for 10-year-olds like to gravitate to. That's really, it's sort of a lost genre.
Yeah, it is. It is, unfortunately. In the one episode where you come home late, and the beaver gets mad at you because you're late, and he gives you a feel of you're like, well, I'm 17 years old. Why do we need to see you? And of course, he gives the classic line, well, you understand one day when you have kids of your own.
Kids of your own. Exactly.
So did you know? I mean, your kid was Lee Phoenix, which is Phoenix, who just played the Joker. I mean, you ever like look at this stuff and like, he was my son 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, when you asked, actually, when you asked the question earlier about how do your kids feel about you doing this, when they learned that I basically parented Joaquin Phoenix, the Joker, in an episode of Leave It to Beaver, I did take on a new status.
Nice.
It was actually very, very funny. The interesting thing is Joaquin was like one of the sweetest kids. He was only a couple years younger than me, but when you're I think I was maybe 17 at the time, and he was probably, I don't know, 13. He like, it's a big difference, right, at that age. And he was much more of a kid. That family was so sweet. Summer and Leaf were like the best behaved, ready to work kids. And he was a rock star then. I mean, like, you knew it, doing just these scenes down in, I think we're in Orlando, because he was also doing Parenthood.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which, he was brilliant in. And we were all down there filming, and you knew it. You knew this kid had just something. But, we had these people, like I was saying, I mean, Jack Black beat me up in the show. I mean, like, my kids freaking love that. They're like, the School of Rock dude, like, bullied you? Okay, you're cool. I mean, it's hysterical what makes you cool, but I'll take it.
Castmate Kalina Kiff was on the Tonight Show on a couple of times with Johnny Carson.
Yes, she
when
was.
Those kind of things happen, do you get jealous at that point that she had the opportunity and you hadn't gotten that? And I mean, that's a big deal to be on the Tonight Show.
Kalina had already built up quite a reputation with Johnny. So she had done the Tonight Show back when she was working with Tony Randall on Love Sydney, and he adored her, and you could tell why. When she went on that show, she was so funny, and she was just a little girl when she was on Love Sydney. I mean, really a little girl. And Johnny Carson just ate it up. The conversations they would have were hysterical. And so I remember that my sort of interest in, kind of everything, I loved the business of all this. I loved, like, the whole kind of machinery. And so Kalina being on that, I wasn't a stage kid. I wasn't this person who was like, oh, gee, I want that.
Okay.
I was more fascinated by it, and I was fascinated that she was doing it, and she was brilliant at it. She was asked back again and again, and to be asked back again and again on Johnny's show was a big deal. And so I knew that he was a god to me. And I remember going on. Did you guys ever see this is a very New York show, but he was famous in New York. Have you ever heard of a guy named Joe Franklin?
I have not.
Okay, Google him, because you will laugh. Okay, so you could probably somehow find it, but Tony Dow and I did an interview. We were in New York for a bunch of interviews, and by the way, I was the one that was doing all the like Tiger Beat and Teen Beat magazines, and of course Kalina wasn't doing those things. We were all doing, things that were appropriate for us. I wasn't going to be the cute little kid who said wacky things on the Tonight Show, and I knew that. Like, from a business standpoint, like, what is Johnny going to talk to me about? But having Kalina on talking about, like, going horseback riding, they would end up in these hysterical conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, Tony and I went on this show, the Joe Franklin Show, which is a very famous show in New York, and we laughed so hard. This guy was an old timer. He had interviewed everybody, and I remember asking him on the show what was the secret to his success, and his answer, because he'd been like on television for like 50 years, and his answer was hysterical and also very true. He said, "Well, kid, you don't peak too soon." And I mean, it was actually true. He had never become huge, but he had always been famous.
Wow. And
he kind of rode along. So we all had these wacky, experiences. I remember cutting the ribbon. I think the Boardwalk for Baseball thing in Orlando. We did these crazy, we were opening up like baseball fields and studios, and I got the key. I think I got the key. I was like the mayor of Universal City at one point. I mean, like, we got these crazy honors. Like, we didn't know what was going on. It was hysterical stuff. Here's the key to the city. We were like, okay.
So what does that get you? Does that like?
It doesn't get you anything. It just seems really cool at the time.
Can you imagine if you go down to Universal now and be like, "Yeah, I'm the mayor of Universal. You got to let us in for free."
It's kind of cool because I think I was like the mayor of Munchkin City in The Wizard of Oz once. When I was 11. So it's kind of nice.
Did you hear the whole Brian Levant interview?
If I didn't hear all of it, I definitely heard a lot of it.
All right. Did you hear the part?
I haven't spoken to Brian in a little while, and it was like so nice to hear. It was almost like I was with him. So I really, sitting in Luxembourg, because we live in Europe, and it was just a really nice thing to kind of hear him and kind of sit back and be like, there's Brian.
Well, I want to ask the tippy toe question. So did you hear the part where he talked about when you lived with him?
Well,
Here we go.
Are you talking about his reference to poor Shannon Doherty?
Yes, we have to ask about that.
It's so bad. First of all, he, there's something that happens when you are, 16, and all of these guys who write for you have this vicarious fantasy about your life and versus your actual life. And the truth of the matter is, Shannon was a sweetheart. Her mom is a sweetheart, and I'm rooting for her in everything that she is going through right now in her life because she's not well. But none of that happened. So that his story was a fantasy. Now, were there stories of girls calling the house when I was living at Bryon's? Yes. Did Al pick up the phone and basically Al is Bryan's wife, who was, my second mom, and basically tell off these girls because she was not allowing me to go out. Yes, those things did happen. Some of those were actresses on the show, but in general, like I said, I happened to have an extraordinary list of co-stars over the years, but I can say with full humility that I had the same girlfriend I was like Wally in many ways. I had the same girlfriend throughout high school, and that was my story. And so I could have been fortunate enough to have maybe some girlfriends in high school that were famous TV actresses. However, I opted out of that world and stuck with my Mayfield and had that experience. But it did always make me laugh because I knew Bryon and the writers were always talking about because Al was fending off some interesting phone calls late at night, and there were a few stalkery moments where she would say, "You're going to leave Kip alone." I was just like, oh my God. It was very, very funny, but not Shannon.
Okay.
No. There was never a pool table and any actress.
I appreciate you kindly addressing
always
that.
Enjoy a good Bryon Vance story.
Absolutely.
Written or spoken.
Yeah, and again, this is the thing. I mean, Bryon he's one of the funniest people on the planet. And whenever I would write something after I was done with the show and I wanted someone to look at it, just tell me is this landing? Is this funny? You would go to Bryon. I mean, he knew how to construct a joke, to set up a situation, and just he's just funny. He just is naturally funny in that way, and so he could coach you and turn something which was like, okay, that's working pretty well, and make it a whole event, and that was his genius. So he had an avid imagination.
I've been kind of collecting Heather O'Rourke's stories. She was on 2 episodes of the new Leave It to Beaver.
Yep.
Did you have any stories that you could share with us?
Outside of the fact that I thought she was one of the most adorable little girls on the planet, and her untimely death rocked our set. Outside of that, my memory of her was just always that, I think we wanted her to be on the show whenever she could be on the show. She was absolutely precocious and precious, and obviously once Poltergeist, I mean, she was a legend. And again, the shock of her loss was it was madness. It was madness. But I didn't, remember that she was maybe 4 or 5 years younger than me. So she was a real baby for me. So the little kids, obviously, I mean, I mentored Johnny and stuff like that and Kalina, but I didn't really spend much time with the littles. But again, another example of just, just a huge talent.
So now, a few weeks ago, we spoke to Janice Kent.
Yeah.
And she had mentioned that you two were very close in filming of the show. Do you guys still, I know you guys are half a world away, so it doesn't happen very often, I imagine, but are you in touch today?
Definitely. I think I just posted on a Facebook message to her to get her butt to Luxembourg and visit with our family. Janice, I adore Janice. She's, first of all, she is immensely talented. She was, one of these people, like, you were so lucky to have her on the show because she, like me, came from the East Coast. She was a bit of an outsider to the whole sort of Beaver experience, and we both kind of gravitated to each other and had hysterical moments of I think alignment on funny things that would occur on the set, and also just a great friendship. We both love the arts, and in general, we both came from the theater. She was at my wedding, and she was at my movie premiere for the movie that I wrote and produced when we were out in LA for the American Film Institute. She's just always been there. It's kind of, again, extended family. And so I would put her in the inner circle for me, and always to be, and just rock star talent and also rock star coach. So she kind of also, beyond just being so talented, is a really great acting coach and taught a ton of young adults. And she just has the right skills for that, the right patience and the love. She's a real love for it. She's awesome. Like Tony too, these are just salt of the earth people. I remember going, over to Tony and his wife's house and doing sleepovers with his son, Tony's son, at the time, and hanging with Tony and going to the beach in Malibu, and these were seminal moments. These were really, Tony and Janice were kind of, I didn't really know Jerry well, you know what I mean? Jerry wasn't somebody who got to know the kids that much. And so, Tony was like the guy, like classic uncles, right? Like he's the one you wanted to spend all your time with.
The cool uncle.
Yeah, exactly. And he was. Yeah. He really was. He and really talented director and writer, and we got to do a bunch of shows together where that was always the fun thing, right? Because the writer's room, you go in and you do these read-throughs on Monday. You didn't know what you were getting, so it was my favorite day, really, because it was a real surprise. You would sit down and, you'd read an episode like, Daydreaming or I Had It All, and you'd go, okay, this is going to be fun. This is going to be, and then you knew, oh, it's 2 weeks. Okay, Tony's going to direct this one, or Bryan's going to direct this one, or Bob Cleaver, or whoever. And, these were all like guys you wanted to work with.
So do you have any memorabilia from the show? Do you still have your Mayfield sweater?
Yeah, I do. I do. I still have my Mayfield sweater, and actually it's sort of amazing, but my grandpa, who stayed with me, Grandpa Leonard, stayed with me in LA for one of the seasons, and he became kind of famous on the set. Everybody loves him, and he was buried in a Mayfield sweater because it was something that he really identified and loved having. They gave him one as sort of like when he finished his tour with me, and he always wore it. And so when we laid him to rest, he wore a Mayfield sweater. Outside of that, I probably have some old baseball shirts from the some of our softball league and baseball league stuff that we did for the show. And I have a plaque that I think the studio gave us when we finished 100 episodes. And that, because obviously that was a very big milestone. And so I've always kept that. It's a nice thing to have.
Well, it's always been my quest to find myself one of those sweaters. I had one made that was not quite right, but one of the
colors the colors are tough, and you have to get the M font right, and it's not easy, but it's it was. I remember when the one thing I did not, I don't know what happened to it actually, but I mean that was the miss, is that I did not somehow either keep or it was destroyed. I'm not sure, but was the leather Letterman coat. So that Letterman jacket versus the sweater. So the Letterman jacket was my favorite, and that did not survive. That was a nice coat. One of the other things that was great was that every season when I would do the show, remember, like I was growing. So pretty much when I finished the season, the wardrobe department gave me my clothes. So it was actually great. I mean, when it was a good season, I also had some really bad clothes sometimes. So, I go through and say, no, thanks. But there were a couple seasons I got really lucky, and, I'd end up with some really cool, mid-'80s, just hitting type of wardrobe and be like, okay, I'm going back to Connecticut in style. But that jacket eluded me. Sad. But anyway, on the wardrobe side now, not too much.
The list, you had the sweater that you wore in the episode, which was always a blank one, and then the whole entire cast and crew had one.
Yep.
Which said Mayfield on the chest, and the name.
Yeah,
of the chest.
You're right.
Which
well done.
You see in a couple of episodes there. In fact, the episode where he gets beat up by Buddy Black, there's a couple of guys that are probably from the crew that are used as extras.
You're right.
And they're wearing sweaters, but you see that they got embroidery on the chest.
Yeah, it's totally not accurate, right?
Yeah.
It's really funny, actually.
So do you have the episode one with the name and without the name and stuff, or do you have the one that you had off the set? Or did you have one off the set?
I have the cast and crew. I don't have the blank.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually true. I didn't even think about that, but that is true. They're not embroidered. But the one I have is
with the 2 P's, with your own name.
With 2 P's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I always think of little things, you see every once in a while you'll see an extra in the background. Look at the chest and I'll see, with the blank one, then it's
exactly.
Then there's ones where they got writing on them, and they probably are from the crew, and they're just standing in.
In 1999, you wrote and starred a movie that we mentioned a little bit earlier called Let It Snow, alongside a person who is now your wife, Alice Dillon. So were you guys already a couple? And I'm assuming based on your previous answers, you were. There's a reason why you guys starred as each other's love interest.
So we met after I had graduated college, and Allie was still an actress at NYU. And I pretty much, after a certain time, I wrote the picture for her and sort of styled it to her sort of comedic, and a lot of the meet cute stuff was definitely meet cute stuff from our relationship. And when I started to raise the money for the film and we started doing readings, Allie started doing the readings, and people just pretty much fell in love with her. And, all the investors were like, I hope this is the star of the film. And so it's actually rather easy. to make the decision to have her star in it. The truth of the matter is that the harder part was that we needed to get a name.
Mm-hmm.
And because there was a bit of a contingency in our investor group to have somebody of some significance play a big role. And so I had a connection to Bernadette Peters. And Bernadette, this is back in '99, so 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernadette at the time was starring in a bunch of Broadway shows, and the person I knew her, I had done Les Miserables with, which I'd done on Broadway after I graduated from college, and he was the executive producer. And so I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I have this script. At the time it was called Snow Days," and I said, I'd really love to get this to Bernadette. So he said to me, "Okay, I'm going to give you her fax number, but use your judgment." And, of course, in my judgment, it seemed perfectly reasonable to fax her the entire script.
Uh-huh.
Now, I later learned that she had one of those old fax machines that had the scrolls.
Oh, no.
And so basically she got home from the Hamptons, and this 110-page screenplay was completely sprawled. It was like, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, like all over her floors of her apartment in Upper Manhattan. And she walked into the house and was like, "What the heck is going on?" So she read through the script. I was scouting locations in New York for the film, and I get this phone call, and it's Bernadette. I mean, she literally called me. Bernadette was a bit of a legend for me, also seminal, like The Jerk, all these movies growing up, Pennies from Heaven. And she said, "It's Bernadette Peters, and I want to meet you." And I went to her penthouse to kind of talk through the script with her. And again, this is like a goddess of both Broadway and film. And I arrived at her place, and I'm not great with dogs. I'm not very comfortable. Like if you have like a big dog and they run at me, I'm like, okay, I don't.
Well, Frozen.
And she had
yeah.
this humongous dog, and the dog barreled out of her apartment and jumped on me. It was not the right start to the author and the actress sort of scene. And but I kept my cool. I was like, "Nice dog," trying to act like I knew what to do with the dog, And so anyway, we went into her apartment and we had this crazy conversation. And at some point, she said, "We're going to make your movie." And I remember thinking I won the lottery, but I also knew that she was an actress and that her agent would probably say no. And so even though she was saying yes, that didn't mean that it was a done deal. And so at the time, I just said to her, "Look, Bernadette, you're saying yes to me today on a Sunday afternoon, but tomorrow when I talk to William Morris, it's going to be no." And she said, "I call the shots, and it's going to be yes."
Wow.
And the next day, her agent called me, and he said, he got on the phone. I always imagined her agent as drinking mint juleps. He had this this very southern accent, and he sounded like he was out of a Tennessee Williams play. And he was like, "Miss Bernadette doesn't work for $50 a day, and it was a SAG low budget contract. It was like this crazy low budget contract." And I said, "Well, Miss Bernadette said she's doing the movie, so you might want to talk to your client."
Ooh.
And within 24 hours, we had a letter of intent, and we were making a movie with Bernadette Peters. And so Alice Dillon got to star in the movie, and I was never challenged because we ended up having a name in Bernadette. And I brought my brother in to direct the movie, who is a really talented horror film director, but it also, throughout high school, he and I had done a ton of romantic comedy plays and musicals together. And so, again, family event. So Adam directed, I produced and wrote, starred. Allie starred. Bernadette came in, played my mom. we filmed it in my house in Connecticut, and we filmed in the city, and all these places that were near and dear. I had a lot of my friends from Les Miserables in it.
How neat.
And like guys like Stephen Colbert. I mean, I actually, it's actually amazing. I was thinking about this the other day because I was looking at Bryon's insane cast list. But when I look back at the Let It Snow cast list, I was like, wow, the number of people that were coming up at that time, like Colbert, that ended up in our movie, this little film that could, and got distributed in 30 countries. I mean, it was kind of amazing.
That's great. All right, finish up with this last story, because 2 weeks ago we were supposed to do an interview. In fact, Bryon had come over to my house. Now he's in Florida. He came over. We're in the studio. We're waiting for Kipp Marcus to give us a call. And what do we find out? A BS line that says, my car is stuck in an elevator. And I thought, no way this is true. And then you send me the picture. So tell me what happened.
The car, basically, the elevator ate my car. So my... it was a classic. It's really a Cleaver story if you think about it. But it's Cleaver by way of 21st century and expatriates living in Luxembourg working for Amazon. My wife had come back to Connecticut with two of our babies to spend some time with friends and family. I had the older kids, and we were all in Luxembourg, and we were coming home from going to, I think it was a birthday. Yeah, it was a birthday it was another birthday. So I had a birthday today for my daughter.
I hope this one went better.
Frozen, New York. But that was, we were going to see a movie with a bunch of my son's friends in Luxembourg, and we got home, and we have this crazy Bond. It's like this James Bond elevator system. And you drive your car into this crazy Lazy Susan thing. It spins around, and then you lock it, and you walk out of it, and you swipe a key. And when you swipe the key, the car literally drops. And then it finds a spot. It drops into the floor of this ancient. I'm not kidding. This ancient sort of medieval structure. And then it finds a spot to park in. Well, anyway, it went halfway down, and then it didn't go any further. And so I had 10 cars waiting outside of this crazy facility as I stood inside this place trying to get my car not to be swallowed up by this, this stupid, robot thing. And so I ended up texting you guys I felt so bad. I'm so sorry. I was literally I know this sounds like a dog ate my homework or something, but my car literally was just eaten by a robot, and I can't get it out, and I can't leave because there's this line of cars, and everybody's hating me and speaking in Luxembourgish. And finally, I was able to get it out, but by then you guys were like, okay, this kid we're not doing this tonight. So anyway.
No,
I appreciate that we were able to reset it up. It's been super fun. Again, you guys are doing a great job, and it's great to know that there are communities like this and people talking about these shows and digitize, the stuff that's being done with digitizing what can be digitized so that people can even see them.
Thank goodness for Scott Hetrick.
Yeah, Scott is he's a rock star. And it's great because kids like my sons and daughter are having a chance to look at it, because I don't even have a VCR, so we've taped somewhere in some storage unit somewhere, but it's just great that there's a place online to kind of look at some of this stuff.
Were you able to get videos from did Bryon get videos for you guys somehow? Or?
Yeah, back in the late '80s, we had old VHS tapes because we would request them from time to time, and then they would send us them. And at some point, I will. It's one of those classic things. You have 5 kids, the number of things you're the things that you were oh yeah, I need to do that. Taking them to a film house and just getting them digitized is a classic one. Of course, the number of bins that we have in units somewhere in the world with the number of places we have lived in our lives, God only knows where those tapes are, but they're in some unit in one of our places. And one day when I have a moment, I'll sit down and get them digitized. But for now, we have Scott. Thanks,
That's
Scott.
awesome.
And thank goodness for him, for sure.
Yeah, totally.
For sure.
Thank you, Kip, so much for your time. We appreciate your appearance on our show.
Oh, yeah. And congratulations. I think you are the first kid from the new show that's ever done an interview in an open forum.
Well, ring the bell.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, we got to get Johnny and Eric and Kalina. I saw Kalina. She visited me in Luxembourg last year. It was really great. We had dinner together, and it was great to see her. And she's doing great.
We've been talking to her on Facebook, and she's very reluctant to do the interview. I know she's been listening to these, so hopefully maybe you can. I'm serious. Maybe you can push her a little bit.
I gotta be a big cousin to her on that one. I mean, come on. I'm sure she's just shy about it or something. But and Johnny, I mean, these guys, they gotta get. And John, the other thing I will say is that John Snee kept me laughing my entire childhood. He was offset. I mean, there were things that he would do that just he was the person that more film takes were ruined because literally he just was so funny as a human that he made you laugh like the kid in school that you just, no matter what, you would get in trouble because you couldn't stop laughing because that kid was around. And that was Johnny. I mean, he just, for me, he was the perfect little brother who kept me in stitches. He really did. Just a great kid, great family. The Snee family, they all had red hair. By the way, the entire family has red hair. They're just adorable. It's like a family of the dad, the mom, the kids. It's like the entire family has red hair. Just great. It's very, very blessed to have these people as second family. So I'll send quick notes around everybody, just letting them know it was a good experience.
Great. Give them my email, and
awesome.
we'd love to complete the circle, get everybody on.
Yeah, totally.
Great.
I get it.
Cool. All right.
Awesome,
Well, thank
guys.
you.
Enjoy your night.
You too.
Yeah,
Thanks.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Our thanks to Kipp Marcus for joining us over the last couple weeks here on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. Elizabeth, it's really good that you came back.
Thanks.
And it's nice to see you in person.
I'm excited to be here. I missed it.
We have a lot of stories that we're going to share with you next week. So be here. It's just going to be me and Elizabeth hanging out.
And of course, as always, if you have an idea, you can always get a hold of us at hello@fancounters.com.
I'm glad you didn't forget your job.
It's the only job I have.
You can join us on Facebook. Search Fan Counters on Facebook, or go to our private group, Sharpie Nation, also on the Facebook. Well, if you haven't given it up for Lent.
I didn't.
I didn't either. Because how could I promote the show?
Right.
All right. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See ya. Bye.